We're all supposed to. I mean, we're all.
Good evening. Special town meeting will now be in order. I'm Carmen Reese, 52 Devon Street, Town Moderator. I see that we have a sufficient number of voters present to permit us to open the meeting, and I do so declare. The meeting is called pursuant to a warrant signed by the Select Board on October 31st, 2022. I've inspected the return of service on the warrant and found it to be in order. We're very grateful to Superintendent Hunter, Principal Mastrullo, the Regional School Committee, and the faculty, students, and staff of the high school for accommodating us here this evening, assisting us with preparations for the meeting and bearing with the disruption that we cause. This evening, the venue for the meeting includes the gymnasium and the auditorium. Masks are required in the auditorium and optional in the gymnasium, and voting will take place only by people in seats in these two areas, except in the unlikely event that we run out of seats in these two areas and need to expand into the cafeteria. But right now, there is no voting in the cafeteria. Ms. Carolyn Flood of 1289 Main Street, who was elected by 2022 annual town meeting to serve as the deputy moderator, will be serving in that capacity this evening. And in addition, I have appointed Mr. Michael Lawson of 1695 Lowell Road as assistant moderator. I am presiding here in the gymnasium. Deputy Moderator Flood is in the auditorium. And in the event that we do run out of seats in both of these venues, we will open the cafeteria as a third area for participation in the meeting, and Assistant Moderator Lawson will preside. Live video of the meeting is being broadcast on our local cable access channel, Channel 9, and on the Minuteman Media Network website. Live audio is being broadcast on our high school radio station, which is WIQH 83.3 FM. The minutes of the meeting will be kept by Town Clerk Kari Tari, who is seated here on my left. And I'd now like to invite Fire Chief Tom Judge to come to the podium and tell us what we need to know in the unlikely event of an emergency this evening. Chief Judge.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Just a reminder that in both rooms, the auditorium and the gymnasium, there are exits in all four corners. In the gymnasium to your right, there is an exit, I assure you. The sign is blocked by the screen, but it is there. If you have children in the child care, we would ask you, if we do have to evacuate the gym, to please don't go to the child care. They'll be gone before you get there. The staff is going to escort them out and bring them over to the courtyard near the cafeteria. So please, if you need to reunite with them, that's where to do it. So exits all four corners. If you have to leave, just follow the exit signs in the hallways to get to the outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Judge. I thank both Chief Judge and Interim Police Chief Mulcahy and both of their departments for all of the support that they have provided for this special town meeting. There are a variety of materials pertaining to the business of the meeting that are available on the tables in the cafeteria. If you did not bring your own copy of the very informative Finance Committee report from home, you will find some extras on the tables as well as extra copies of the warrant. There's also a green booklet entitled Concord Town Meeting Traditions and Procedures, which is a very useful guide to our proceedings here this evening. If you have a handheld smart device with you, you can also access the materials for the meeting on the town website, which is www.concordma.gov. And on a mobile phone interface, you'll want to click on the important documents icon, select town meeting, and then scroll all the way down to the bottom to 2023, and that's where you'll find the materials. The Wi-Fi network here in the high school is Town Meeting, aptly named, and no password is required. If you do have questions about town meeting procedure this evening, please feel free to talk with our town meeting procedure resource person, who is Elise Woodward of 379 Garfield Road. She is available for consultation on process issues and assistance in drafting and presenting motions and amendments. Ms. Woodward is seated in the front row here in the gymnasium. I'm going to ask her to stand and wave so everyone can see where she is. Thank you so much, Ms. Woodward. Please note that anybody with a proposed amendment to a motion this evening should bring it to the gymnasium where we are set up to review amendments with town council and get them projected on the screen for consideration of the meeting. At check-in, you should have received your voting slip, which is this beautiful color blue this time around. Your voting slip is what identifies you as a person entitled to vote, and please do keep track of it. Putting your name on it is a great idea. I have appointed Mr. Abe Fisher of 400 Hayward Mill Road to be head teller, and Mr. David Carr of 82 Lawsbrook Road to be ballot supervisor, and Mr. Richard Wells of 368 Lawsbrook Road as assistant ballot supervisor. Mr. Fisher will be supervising vote counting on the floor, should we have to have a standing count. And Mr. Carr will be supervising the ballot counting procedure and vote certification in the event that the meeting votes to have a paper ballot on a motion. Mr. Fisher, are the tellers ready to be sworn? Mr. Carr, are the ballot counters ready to be sworn? Thank you. Tellers and ballot counters, would you all please stand and raise your right hands, and both in the auditorium and here. Does each of you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform your respective duties at this town meeting? Thank you all. On behalf of the meeting, I thank Mr. Fisher, Mr. Carr, Mr. Wells, and each and every one of the tellers and ballot counters for taking on this vital town meeting function for us. And we're pleased to have some Concord Carlisle High School students among our tellers and ballot counters tonight. We also owe our gratitude to the team of people who have made this special town meeting possible this evening, including our dedicated and talented town staff led by Chris Carmody and Donna McIntosh, Minuteman Media Network, Boston Sound and Light, who have brought all of this equipment for us, and our amazing closed caption stenographer, Stephanie Farrell. Our select board, our school committees, our finance committee, and the Concord Middle School Building Committee are seated at the front of the gymnasium. Members of other boards and committees, including the Community Preservation Committee and the Concord Affordable Housing Trust, are also here with us this evening. We owe all of the volunteers on these committees a great debt of gratitude for their work on the proposals that we'll be taking up this evening. Thank you all so much. And we're always looking for more people to help take a laboring oar on all the work we have to do for our town. There are volunteer cards in the lobby, and I would encourage anyone thinking about serving your town on a board or committee to pick one up, and you can peruse the town report or the website to see what opportunities might be available. We also have with us this evening Town Council Mina Markarius of Anderson and Krieger. Mina, you want to wave? There he is. He will address the meeting if we have a legal question for him. Now, before we begin the business of this special town meeting, let those of us stand and hold a moment of silence, if you're able. Tonight we are Concord's legislature. Because we are here not only as private citizens, but also as legislators, we must bear in mind, as we cast our votes, not only our personal interests, but also those of our community as a whole. And as we deliberate, let each of us here tonight maintain an open mind, an open heart, respect and graciousness when we disagree, and a healthy sense of humor, so that the debates of this meeting will not be a source of division among us when our business here is finished. Thank you, and please be seated. Mr. Johnson moves that the reading of the warrant and the return of service thereon be omitted. Is there a second for this motion? I see that there is. Any discussion? I don't see any. I don't see any in the auditorium. The motion appears to pass unanimously, and I do so declare. And we will now proceed to the consent calendar, which includes Articles 1 and 4. And you will see the motion there on the screen. And it's that Ms. Briggs moves that we take up and advance for consideration the articles that are in this table. They include Articles 1 and 4. And that we vote on these articles without any debate, provided that upon the request of any 10 voters at this meeting made before the vote is taken, that we will remove the article or a portion thereof, if that's what's appropriate, from the consent calendar and act on it in the ordinary course of business at special town meeting. Now, the first article, thank you very much. The first article is the fossil fuel infrastructure article, which is confirming authorization to apply for the participation of the town in a fossil fuel-free demonstration project. Affirmative action is recommended on this article by the Select Board, and the motion is to take affirmative action on Article 1 as it's printed in the warrant. And the reason this is on the consent calendar is that this is really confirmation of Select Board authorization that furthers an affirmative vote that town meeting had on Article 31 in 2021 to take up a fossil fuel limitation bylaw on new construction. And we will further that article by authorizing the Select Board to apply for participation in a legislative program that authorizes certain towns to adopt this bylaw, limiting the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure. There are also amendments to the bylaw as we passed it in 2021 in order to bring that bylaw into confirmation with the legislative program. And this was non-controversial at our hearings. Is there anyone who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar? I see no one in the gymnasium. Anyone in the auditorium, Carrie?
No, there's no one in, no
Great,
one
thank
standing
you.
in the auditorium, at least for that reason. There's still some people looking for seats, but
Thank you. The next article on the consent calendar is Article 4. This is the Community Preservation Act Community Housing Reserve Fund. Affirmative action on this one is recommended by the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and the Community Preservation Committee. And the motion again is that the town take affirmative action on this article as it is printed in the warrant. This is a routine action which rescinds Community Preservation Fund appropriations that were made for community housing that have been unused and will remain unused due to the cancellation of the Junction Village project. And this article will appropriate those funds back to the Community Housing Reserve Fund, maintained by the Community Preservation Committee and held for future town meeting appropriation for community housing projects. Do we have anyone who would like to remove this article from the consent calendar? Ms. Flood, do we have anybody in the auditorium who would like to remove it?
I do not see anybody for that purpose.
All right, let us have a second, please, on the consent calendar. I see that I have one. Thank you very much, and we'll now proceed to a vote. All those in favor of the consent calendar, Articles 1 and 4, please raise your voting slips. All those opposed? The motion passes nearly unanimously in the gymnasium. How about in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
It appears to be unanimous here.
Very good. That is a near unanimous vote in favor of Articles 1 and 4, and I do so declare. We will now proceed to Article number 2. And we'll have that presentation up on the screen in just a moment. And the motion on this article is Mr. Johnson moves that the meeting take affirmative action on Article 2 as printed in the warrant. Can we have a second for the motion, please? I see that we have one. And I will note that affirmative action is recommended on this article by the Select Board, the Concord Housing Development Corporation, the Concord Housing Authority, and the Concord Affordable Housing Trust. And we'll hear from Mr. Bergman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Keith Bergman, 56 White Avenue, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. This is the first of two articles tonight to reauthorize filing home rule petitions to the state for dedicated funding sources for Concord's Municipal Affordable Housing Trust so that we do not have to rely on the property tax. These petitions were first approved by town meeting in 2019, and we're looking to file an amended form for the current legislative session. Article 2 continues to seek a 1% real estate transfer fee on properties sold, but would exempt the first $1 million rather than just $600,000 of value from that fee, and allow trust funds to be used to benefit households earning up to 150% of area mean income, a level referenced under Concord zoning bylaw. To create and fund a municipal affordable housing trust, which can act quickly as opportunities arise, 2019 voters had approved the Affordable Housing Funding Committee's plan to accept the enabling state statute and later a town bylaw and file home rule petitions for a real estate transfer fee and a building permit surcharge, which we'll discuss in Article 3, to fund the trust. Together, these might raise some $2.2 to $2.4 million per year. In the meantime, voters have annually appropriated $500,000 for the trust for a total of $2 million since 2019, and we are grateful for that support. Article 2 would reauthorize seeking special state legislation for a real estate transfer fee of 1% paid by the buyer for the portion of the purchase price above $1 million rather than $600,000, as I said. Also exempt would be transfers of property to federal, state, and local government, including Concord's housing entities, properties with affordable housing deed restrictions, confirmatory deeds for no consideration, and transfers to family members or to charitable or religious organizations. Trust funds could benefit households of up to 150% of area mean income. I should add the percentage of AMI had not been defined in the prior petitions, and so we wanted to do so here. A proposed statewide local option real estate transfer fee for affordable housing, also under consideration by the legislature, requires acceptance by town meeting without a local ballot vote. So we're proposing that procedure as well for our home rule petition. If this saved a year in implementing a new fee, it could save Concord a year's interim appropriation for the trust. The town estimates that this would raise some $1.9 million per year if the resulting bill were enacted by the state legislature and approved again by town meeting. The Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust can act quickly when affordable housing opportunities arise if dedicated funding sources are in place. We would appreciate voters' continuing support by approving Article 2. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bergman. You are under time, and let's hope that's a trend. We'll now open the floor to question and discussion on Article 2. And if you wish to speak or ask a question, please approach a microphone. We have 3 microphones here in the gymnasium and 2 in the auditorium, and each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak, and we will start the timer for you when you are recognized. I see no one wishing to speak in the gymnasium. We'll go to the auditorium. Ms. Flood?
Okay, the speaker at microphone number 2, please.
Rich Feely, 347 Lexington Road, president of the Concord Housing Foundation.
Mr. Feely. Proceed.
because we are sensitive to the concerns that real estate taxes are making the town more affordable for some of our poorer citizens. Or poor is the wrong term these days, for many people of moderate income. There was a time when the market created housing for a spectrum of incomes. That isn't happening anymore. So we need this money, and we don't want to take it from the real estate tax. This will tax or obtain money from the very process that is making Concord unaffordable. Tear downs, the shortage of land, and the increase in construction prices. So we ask you to do this, make good on our commitment to affordable housing, and not be dependent on the property tax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feely. Ms. Flood, is there anyone else waiting to speak in the auditorium? Looks
Madam
like,
Moderator, we could use Abe Fisher's help over here with seating, please.
okay. Mr. Fisher, is it possible to send a teller over to assist with the seating in the auditorium? Thank you so much. All right, I don't see anyone else. Oh, I'm so sorry. Microphone number 3.
Hi, Moira Walsh, 169 Thoreau Street, Concord Housing Foundation.
Yes, Ms. Walsh.
Keith, could you just tell people what the AMI is at 150%? I think a lot of people would like to hear that figure.
Mr. Bergman?
Madam Moderator, through you to the previous speaker, and for reference, there are handouts on Articles 2 and 3, and there is a, I don't know if do I have access to the slide deck? There we go. And thank you. These are the, oh, no, that's the purchase price of what it would be. So we go to the next slide. There you go. Household income limits that 150% of area mean income would mean an income of, for a household of 4, $210,000. The median income in Concord is $161,000, and our Concord zoning, the planned residential development, allows up to 150% of AMI, and we would like to be able to have our trust funds be a potential source of funding for planned residential developments as well as other at lower income levels.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Anyone else wishing to speak in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
I do not see anybody. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Go ahead. Microphone number 1, Mr. Fisher.
Madam Moderator, I'm Abe Fisher. I'm the head teller of this meeting. We have a few more people in the auditorium than we originally expected. So we are going to be opening up the third section, but I also need 3 volunteers, preferably people who have done this before and are willing to commit to stay to the end of the meeting, to act as tellers. So if you will bear with us for a couple of minutes while we get the tape taken down and allow people to spread out. And anybody who is willing to operate as a teller.
All right, folks, we will take just a moment so that we can allow people to get seated in the auditorium because they do need to be in seats in order to vote on the article. So give us just a moment. Oh, and I see we have a speaker at microphone number 1 here in the gymnasium.
Hi, good evening. Lisa McKinney, 293 Haywood Mill Road.
Ms. McKinney.
Thank you. I just want to point out, though, that the transfer fee should be considered in the context of the larger financial picture. The state just passed a 4% real estate transaction fee or capital gains fee. Concord is looking also for an additional several $1 million on the middle school project, and this 1% on the real estate transfer fee on top of the 4% means that the sale of a home in Concord, if you use a broker, is probably going to be in excess of 10%. I think that there should be a context to all of the numbers that are being presented this evening for the millions of dollars at stake. And I just want to point out to people that this isn't just 1% for affordable housing, it's 1% on top of the 4% that was passed in the November elections, which is a significant impact. I'm a little surprised that the real estate industry hasn't looked at this impact on the sales of homes more substantially. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Flood, do you have anyone at a microphone in the auditorium?
There are still people moving around, but I don't see anybody at a microphone.
Okay.
So we do need some time for people to get seated.
All right. We'll give you just a moment. Looks like we're pretty much good to go, Ms. Flood, you think?
2 more people still wondering. Just a moment. And the new volunteer tellers are just being sworn in. We appreciate them signing up at the last minute here. Reminder to those in the auditorium that everybody must be in a seat in order to vote.
Same reminder here in the gymnasium, if you wish to vote, you must be in a seat.
And still they are arriving.
Okay, I think we're ready to proceed to a vote. Would all those in favor of Article 2 please raise their ballots? Thank you very much. Would all those opposed to Article 2 please raise their ballots? Okay, in the gymnasium, there is some opposition, but I see that the motion passes by an overwhelming margin. And how does it look in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
I would say it's the same in here. There are a handful of people with their ballots raised, but most people were in favor.
All right, then the meeting has voted in favor of Article 2 by an overwhelming majority, and I do so declare. We'll now proceed to Article 3, and we'll have that motion on the screen in just a second. I will note that the motion is for the meeting to take affirmative action on Article 3 as it is printed in the warrant. Could we have a second for the motion? I see that we have one. Thank you. And I will note that affirmative action is recommended on this article by the Select Board, the Concord Housing Development Corporation, the Concord Housing Authority, and the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. And we'll hear again from Mr. Bergman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Keith Bergman, 56 White Avenue, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. This is the second of 2 articles to reauthorize filing home rule petitions to the state for dedicated funding sources for the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust so that we would not have to rely on the property tax. Article 3 seeks a building permit surcharge, which would be established by the Select Board. As with the prior article, if this bill were enacted by the legislature, it would need final approval by town meeting again. As we just reviewed in Article 2, the home rule petitions were part of a plan approved in 2019 to create and fund a municipal affordable housing trust, which can act quickly as opportunities arise. Under Article 3, the building permit surcharge would also benefit households with incomes of up to 150% of area mean income. The previous petition had specified up to 120%, but we would prefer that both bills be at the higher level that's referenced in Concord's zoning bylaws. Annual revenue generated would depend upon the building permit surcharge rate adopted by the Select Board. The Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust can act quickly when opportunities arise if dedicated funding sources are in place. We appreciate your support of Article 2 and would ask that you also vote to approve Article 3. Thanks very much.
You're on a roll, Mr. Bergman, under time again. We'll again open the floor to questions and comments, and again, speakers will have 2 minutes. There are 3 microphones here in the gymnasium and 2 in the auditorium. I don't see anyone in the gymnasium waiting to speak. Do you have anyone in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
No one standing at a microphone.
All right, then. It looks
But I
like...
will remind people that you need to be in a seat in order to vote.
Yes. Same here in the gymnasium. You do need to be in a seat to vote. So if you want to vote on this article, please do find your way to a seat. There are lots of seats on the far side over here, to my left, your right. Okay. All right. Let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor of Article 3, please raise your voting slips. Thank you very much. All those opposed? Okay, that passes by an overwhelming majority in the gymnasium. How does it look in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
Nearly unanimous in favor in this room.
All right, that is a vote by an overwhelming majority in favor of Article 3, and I do so declare. Thank you very much, Mr. Bergen. Okay. We have dealt with Article 4 on the consent calendar. We'll now proceed to Article 5. And we'll have that motion up in just a moment. This is the Concord Middle School building project. As soon as we have the motion up, we'll... Okay, there's the motion. And the motion is that the meeting take affirmative action on Article 5 as printed in the warrant to appropriate the amount of $7,200,000 for the purposes stated in Article 5, and authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Select Board, to raise such amount by borrowing, subject to an affirmative debt exclusion vote of the town, all as set forth in Article 5. And that vote is scheduled for later in February. Could we have a second for the motion, please? I see that we have one. And I will note that affirmative action is on Article 5 is recommended by both the Select Board and the Finance Committee, although in divided votes, and it is recommended for affirmative action by the School Committee and the Concord Middle School Building Committee. And we will hear first from Ms. Gariello and Dr. Hunter.
Dawn Guariello, 57 Bristers Hill Road.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. As I said, my name's Dawn Guariello. I am a community volunteer and co-chair of the Concord Middle School Building Committee alongside Pat Nelson, a fellow community volunteer, and we are here representing our building committee. We have a shared expertise in both building projects as well as education. I am an architect. I design public schools in Massachusetts. Pat has an educational background, runs a early elementary childhood center here in Concord, and was on the Willard Building Committee previously. So just want to share that collectively, the two of us alongside of our building committee have quite a bit of expertise in building projects. So we just want you to know our committee did not walk this journey alone the past year. We have leaned heavily on town committees and organizations, in particular the Select Board and also the Finance Committee along the way. We're grateful to many town organizations and committees, school committee, Council on Aging, League of Women Voters, PTG groups, all for spreading the word about this article. We are also grateful for everyone who came almost 4 years ago to support Article 14 to study this project, and also 364 days, but who's counting, to, to support Article 1 at special town meeting almost exactly a year ago. So thank you. It's with gratitude from our committee that everyone came out to support or just vote on that project. We do recognize that being here almost exactly 1 year to the day, it would be tomorrow, feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, but it's not ideal to be back in front of you asking for additional money to support this project. So just know that we're not happy to be here, but here we are. Circumstances out of our control. So with that, our 19-member committee has spent, on my estimation, approximately 50 hours over 24 meetings over the spring, summer, and fall, analyzing the market conditions that have brought us here tonight. We synthesize input from our design professionals. We listen to others in the community that have experience with building projects in town. We heard the voices of our constituents, and we adhered to the counsel of the Select Board and Finance Committee. So all of that brings us to what we are recommending tonight that is truly the most fiscal responsible recommendation that will benefit all of those in Concord. So with that, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Hunter to make the Article 5 presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gariello.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming out on a really pretty lousy night. Like Dawn said, I just have to reiterate, usually I come here fairly energetic and excited about what we're proposing in front of you. That's not the case tonight, other than it's what we need to be able to build the school. No one saw coming the way this played out, and I think my job is to give you some of the numbers that go with the story and just some highlights of the story itself of the last year. So we're not backtracking to tell you what the new middle school is going to bring for children. We're not going to go through the sustainability. We're really just going to talk about the finances of what's happened literally in the last 364 days. So in that storytelling, a year ago we were here and town meeting approved $102 million, and we thought we were good to go. We worked really hard to get to that number. Since that time, estimates go out periodically along the way, and that's an important, and in this case, critical thing that happened. So the first set of estimates went out when we had a design development phase done in the summer, and that July estimate came back, not as much to our surprise as we might have liked, but $5.5 million over what town meeting approved. That was when we knew we were in a different world and a whole new ballgame and a new strategy emerged. We spent from July until October studying, working with our professionals, looking to see where we could find savings that were as far away from the students as possible and maintain sustainability, and I'll talk on some of the other things we focus on preserving and the priorities. In that time, from July to October, we were able to value engineer, value manage $1.8 million from the project. We hoped that would be enough because in October, a 60% estimate came back. Through this time, the architects are drawing and the design gets more focused. In October, when the 60% design came back, you can see it was a little bit over that original 5%, the July one that we got. What we had essentially done with the 1.8 was mitigate inflation. So that was good news in its own way. The bad news is we are still $5.5 million over the town meeting allocation. So we spent October through January, and literally a week ago, we got back the 90% estimate, all by design with the folks at these tables up front to get the best number possible for this discussion tonight. And you can see we came in at the 109. So we're within the allocation. Tonight you're here to vote on the $7.2 million. You're not here to vote on 110. That's the total project cost that the 7.2 will bring us to. You're here to just vote on whether the additional 7.2 million will be appropriated in order to cover that number that you see there, the 109,795,813. We are not, we wanted to break down this for you a little bit. All of it is construction costs and contingency. Contingency fee is a percentage of the overall cost. So as the construction costs rose, we had contingency that rose appropriately. There is a great deal of contingency here. What we heard loud and clear from the professional estimators through this project is that given such volatile conditions, they are building in more contingency than ever. We will all hope that when this project goes to bid in early spring, maybe we won't need all of this, and those contingencies will have some buffer. But this is the best number they have for us right now, and we're at least coming tonight knowing it's within the allocation on the table. A reminder of what did not change in the last year. The design of the school did not change. That doesn't mean we didn't discuss it. We did, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The design of the school did not change. This is the building that you saw in front of you a year ago. What did change, you know these: inflation, supply chain, war, workforce challenges, all things that we had no control over. We are not alone in this dilemma. So this is the list of schools in the last 6 months that have had the same exact situation play out and had to go back and ask for additional funds. You can see the ranges are anywhere from 4% to upwards of 28%. A number of things play into that, depending on the process you're using for bidding, depending on the conditions and place you are in the project. It all matters. So we're somewhere in the middle. I think you'll see only one of the projects wasn't supported at town meeting, and again, misery loves company. I don't know how to frame it other than that. It's been a really hard time to be building and allocating funds to those projects. The priorities that the committee held, and I think this is worth naming and probably my favorite part of the discussion, educational plan implementation. We had a large document that we've referenced throughout all of these presentations about the priorities of the school in terms of instruction, learning, and teaching. We preserved those. Those were critical to us as we were doing our value management process. Net zero ready design. This town meeting really dictated a certain level of sustainability, a very high level of sustainability back in 2019. That was preserved and prioritized. Through the process, we heard from the community about the size of the gym and the auditorium as common spaces with, a co-purpose of not only the needs of the middle school, but the needs of the community at large. We preserved the MIAA-sized gymnasium. We preserved the 420-seat auditorium. Durability and maintenance, we tried to not be penny wise and pound foolish. We preserved the quality of materials, the quality of the construction, really to be sure that, generations later wouldn't go, what did they decide? Because of these conditions. But I think we were able to successfully accomplish a really solid plan there. Overall, through the course of the project, and this is in total, $6.1 million have been value managed, all without touching those priorities I just named. And that's taken a lot of intense time, energy, due diligence by the committee, by the professionals we work with, by everyone involved. If we hadn't done that, this number tonight would be bigger. And we stand here pretty proud of the time and energy that went in to get to this number to the best possible number we could. You can see 80 items overall were considered. Just for clarity of what happens tonight with the two various outcomes, if you vote yes, the project goes out to bid in March on schedule. I want to stress that. We have maintained the schedule despite all of these challenges. Construction begins in the spring. We will break ground on the fields next to Sanborn. School is slated to open February of 2025, and completion, demolish Sanborn and the fields a year later.
You are out of
Can I
time,
finish
Dr.
this last
Hunter.
slide,
Please go
please?
ahead.
Thank
Last
you.
one.
Very quickly, and I know you've got this, the impact of no is that we have to go backwards and we start again redesigning, bringing you another version of the building, and likely it's more expensive at that time. So we wanted to be sure to name that, and I am wrapping up my time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henner. I want to take just a moment and remind folks that the auditorium has been designated a masks required area, and the gymnasium is masks optional. And we have done that out of respect for those folks who are concerned about their vulnerability to not just COVID, but all the stuff that's floating around at the moment. So I will ask that people in the auditorium do respect that requirement, and if you have forgotten a mask, there are some out in the lobby. Thank you very much. We'll next hear from Mr. Patel on behalf of the Finance Committee.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Parashar Patel, and I'm pleased to be presenting, on behalf of the Finance Committee, a summary of the estimated impact of Article 5 on property taxes and the factors that we considered before recommending affirmative action on the article. I hope everyone's had the opportunity to read our report and have a copy of the slides. If you don't have them, they're out in the hall on the tables. Our report seeks to provide information to residents on the financial impact of the middle school project on property taxes and how the estimated impact has changed since last year so that residents can make an informed decision on Article 5. I'll quickly go over the background, noting, as we've heard since last summer, that estimated construction costs have increased since we were at special town meeting 364 days since last January. Costs for material and labor have increased for a variety of reasons outside the school committee's control. As we just heard, the building committee responded to these higher additional costs a variety of ways by identifying elements and ideas that could be changed to reduce costs. However, the building committee did not consider changes to the auditorium, the gym, and other items that are not in the educational plan. As a result, the building committee seeks to borrow an additional $7.2 million for construction of a new middle school. In addition to construction costs increasing, we've all heard interest rates have increased, which will also raise borrowing costs, as we'll show in a minute. The impact on property taxes for borrowing for the middle school, or any large capital project for that matter, is affected by 4 factors, not unlike the home mortgages many of us carry. First is the actual costs and design of the construction of the building itself, interest rates, the time period used to repay the debt, and the structure of the periodic payments. The next slide shows the current estimated impact of the current estimated cost of the middle school. And you notice I keep using the words current and estimates because they've changed over time, both the impact on property taxes as well as the cost itself. So let me start by orienting everyone to this bridge chart that shows the estimated annual impact at the median home value of borrowing for the middle school. The first 2 columns to the left show the impact of borrowing the $102.8 million approved at January 2022 special town meeting. The next set of columns show the impact of changes in borrowing costs, as well as the impact of borrowing an additional $7.2 million, which is what we're here to talk about today. The last set of columns shows the current estimate for both the $102.8 million approved last year and, if approved, the $7.2 million. So last year, the Finance Department estimated an annual property tax increase of $902 for borrowing $102.8 million, assuming an interest rate of 3.75%, borrowed for 25 years with a level debt structure, as discussed in page 5 of our report. Of the 902, 105 was estimated to be the impact for the $12 million that would later be borrowed in June of 2022. And we're going to come back to that $12 million shortly. As a result of changes in interest rates, the estimated impact of borrowing the remaining $90.8 million increased by $208. So borrowing costs have increased by $208. We can reduce that impact by $81 if we extend the repayment from 25 years to 30 years. Thus, the estimated increase in property tax currently is $924, as shown in the table on page 6 of our report. The same table shows that borrowing $7.2 million is estimated to increase the impact by $73, which is less than the impact of rising interest rates, but nevertheless an increase. Thus, the estimated increase in property taxes for borrowing the remaining $90.8 million plus the $7.2 is almost $1,000. Now we come back to the $12 million that was borrowed last year. While the estimated impact in January of last year was $105, the actual impact is $159 because it was borrowed at 20 years term. Note that this impact is already factored into property taxes sent out a few weeks ago. Thus, the current estimated annual increase in property taxes at the median house value is about $1,200 if Article 5 is approved tonight. Over the past 7 months, the Finance Committee held a series of meetings, as Don noted, with the Middle School Committee, the school committee itself, during which we discussed the rising costs of the middle school. We took several considerations into account: that the actual cost and thus the impact on property taxes may be higher or lower than currently estimated. Indeed, as the previous slide showed, that is likely to be the case. Mitigation strategies may lower the impact on future property taxes. The Building Committee stated, and as we just heard, continues to state that not approving the additional $7.2 million now means higher costs in the future and/or will require substantial changes in the design, size, etc. of the building. We also noted that the current estimated impact of the additional $7.2 million in borrowing is $73, and as just shown, is not the major driver for the higher impact on property taxes for building the middle school. We recognize that higher property taxes means that all taxpayers, but particularly those on fixed incomes, have less money available for spending on other services and items. However, given the other considerations described above, we recommend affirmative action on Article 5. To close, a no vote leaves the original $102.8 million authorization in place. The current estimate for the impact of borrowing that money is $1,084, almost $200 higher than the estimate last year. A yes vote will mean an additional $73 increase in taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. And next, we will hear from our Chief Financial Officer for the town.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to town meeting members. I'm actually the interim finance director. The real CFO is sitting over there. And you won't see her lips move during any of this. Next slide, if you would, Chris. Taxpayers have three different financial impacts in front of them. As Parashar has described, I'm going to take a slightly different perspective. We have, for cash flow needs for the project to move it forward to 90% design and through this spring, already borrowed $12 million last June. I'll come back to the cost of that, but it is already in your tax bill. There is $90.8 million remaining to be borrowed that you authorized almost 1 year ago. And lastly, there's the request in front of the body tonight for $7.2 million. Chris, please. What was borrowed in June in your tax bills for the median home, which is about just under $1.2 million, is about $131. So that's already in tax bills. Because it was a partial year, in the second year it'll go up slightly to $159, and then it will decline as that chart shows, and it'll be fully repaid in 20 years. So that's a done deal, that's a fact. Next slide, please, Chris. One of two amounts will then be borrowed in the future, either 90.8 or the total of that 98-odd million. The plan right now is to borrow half of that this coming spring, probably around May. And again, the town has some debt management tools to help mitigate the cost for taxpayers. And this is the first tool, is to just stagger the amount instead of borrowing the full amount right away. And I should add that depending on how the project progresses, we expect to borrow the second half 1 year from now in May of 2024, but you have to be flexible if the project moves slower. We've lengthened the term. I have discussed this in front of the select board. Previously, the discussions were 20 to 25 years. 30 years makes it cheaper for the short term. and it also spreads out the cost and brings in, if you will, taxpayers from years 21 or 26 through years 30, which seems appropriate for a 50-year minimum building. Lastly, our third part, used level debt service. That's like a mortgage, same payment every year. Usually municipal finance uses level principal, and you see declining amounts over time. You pay the same amount of principal every year, but the remaining balance is lower, so the interest payments are lower. And lastly, I'll touch briefly, there's this middle school stabilization fund of taxpayer money that's been set aside to help reduce the impacts in the first few years. Next slide, Chris. So what's already been authorized will cost that median taxpayer about $460 a year from now, and from then on, about $924 every year for the 30 years. Chris? What's in front of the body tonight is estimated as $36 and change because, again, we're borrowing only half right away. And then it would move to that full $73 a year, again, for the median home. Chris? This is a bit of a busy slide, but really it's meant to show you, if you look at that top line, that's the debt service over time, and that combines all three of these pieces. The first year, because it's just half issued, is a smaller amount, $650 odd. If it jumps up to the number Parrish are cited, just under $1,200, and goes down over time, especially after the 20-year portion is repaid. And again, $180 of the increase is already baked in from last year's estimate because of the change in interest rates. Chris? Lastly, this is one tool that the select board and town meeting could have. This is an illustration. The orange line is if you do nothing, and the blue line is showing you a way to have a gradual increase over the first few years by using the debt stabilization fund. That's all I have. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Bob. We'll next hear from the Select Board. It looks like Mr. Johnson will speak.
Madam Moderator.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm Matt Johnson, speaking on, Chair of the Select Board, speaking on behalf of the Select Board. So the Select Board recommends affirmative action on Article 5. The board's vote was not unanimous, and even those in support continue to be concerned about the project's scope and its tax impact on homeowners with limited incomes. Nevertheless, the majority believe that it's better to proceed because the potential cost of additional design work and project delays diminish the savings opportunities at this stage. The board also recognizes that there's little margin for error in the latest construction estimates. While the project will be within budget if Article 5 passes, its $110 million total project cost must be considered an absolute limit. Further cuts may be required if bids come in higher than expected. The Middle School Building Committee should carefully prioritize features that can be removed if needed and consider possible alternative funding mechanisms rather than pursue any future borrowing for this project should the bids come in high.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I will note that there are 1,030 of us here this evening. And we'll now open the floor for questions and comments. And again, speakers will have 2 minutes. Approach a microphone here in the gymnasium or in the auditorium if you wish to speak. And when you are recognized, please state your name and address, and you will have 2 minutes. We'll start with microphone number 3 in the gymnasium.
Thank you. My name is Wilson Kerr, 20 Damon Street, Concord, Mass.
Mr. Hurd.
So I got involved with this project this summer because my father, who was a select board member in Lincoln for 15 years, said if you're moving to Concord, you need to learn how a town is run. I started going to meetings, and I learned all about the middle school project, much of what you've heard tonight. But really what I learned about is this incredible group of people that have spent 3 years of their lives, the Middle School Building Committee, the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and all of those involved, and I was stunned to find out that they are all volunteers. They have spent thousands of hours on this project. And so tonight, when I thought about speaking, someone asked me what my agenda would be, and I said, I want to address those who have come here tonight with the intention of voting no. And they said, don't bother. Those people have already made their decision. And I said, well, I'm going to try. And I suspect you're going to vote no because you think that by derailing this project, you can lower your taxes. Or maybe you find a fault with the way some design element that you've recently learned about was litigated 2 years ago and you want to stop that for that reason. Or maybe you don't have kids in the school. Or maybe you're single income and are worried about taxes. While these are legitimate reasons to vote no, what we have heard tonight, and my conclusion by looking at this just purely financially, emotion aside, is it will cost more to vote no than it will cost to vote yes. This is why the Select Board recommends affirmative action. The FinCom voted 11-2 to recommend affirmative action. It's why the League of Women Voters looked at this in depth and recommend affirmative action. Please consider voting yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now. All right, so we don't clap. And we do not clap, and we do not have outbursts during or following people's remarks at town meeting. Now, why not? The reason we don't is because we want to respect one another when we disagree. And when you clap for one view of an issue that we are discussing, you are disrespecting the people who hold a contrary view. So let's not do that. Let's all respect each other. We don't come here tonight with the same point of view on everything, but we're going to respect each other and we're going to figure out what we're going to do going forward as a community. Thank you all very much. I would also like to ask people, if you are seated in a row where there are some seats toward the middle, if you are able to scooch in a little bit, that would be fantastic because we do still have people filtering in. And we will go now to microphone number 2 in the gymnasium.
383 Lowell Road.
Proceed.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Concord, Carlisle. The League has given special attention to Article 5 on the middle school funding. With the benefit of the town-sponsored hearings and our own session held on December 2nd with the superintendent, the chair of the finance committee, and a co-chair of the middle school building committee, we believe that the middle school building committee and our town representatives have acted diligently and responsibly with regard to building design and costs, taking into account educational needs, the town's request for the space, and sustainability. The costs for the project have increased for reasons that the committee could not control or fully mitigate despite their best efforts. Costs for this project are unlikely to decrease in the future, and redesigning the project, as will possibly be the case if this article is voted down, will cost us more in the long run, not less. Therefore, we believe the current request for additional borrowing is both necessary and prudent, and recommend an affirmative vote on Article 5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to microphone number 1 now.
Madam Moderator, my name is George Corrett, and I abide at 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
I just have a question financially. I was wondering, when the authorization is given by town meeting and the rest of the process to spend $100 million, what is the decision-making process that goes into deciding not to borrow all of that, at once in the bond market? What's the decision to delay that? Does it have to do with the anticipating interest rates going down, or what is the contingency around that sort of thing? Thank you.
Okay, let's hear from our interim finance director on that question.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ultimately, the authority rests with the treasurer on how and when to borrow. We had a pretty full discussion in front of the select board, I believe it was in December, about how to move forward. And things like 30-year term level debt service were discussed. No matter what's discussed and no matter what is planned, though, you have to be flexible. We have a professional financial advisor, and the debt markets, when you sell, can do whatever they feel like that day. So the only thing I can be sure to tell you is everything we've said tonight won't happen. It'll be different. You have to be prepared and you have to be flexible. Ultimately, while it's the treasurer's decision, which is the CFO to my right, the select board also has to approve the terms of the sale. So certainly would be a discussion in advance with the select board if it was anything different than what I've said tonight.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed now to the auditorium. Ms. Flood, I see you have some
Yes.
folks waiting.
Go ahead, at microphone number 1, please.
Yes, Brian Sykes, 37 Sorrel Road. I have 3 points. So a question, a proposal, and then a lasting thought. Question 1 is how much roughly is allocated in the budget for like playgrounds or outside use at the middle school? Does anybody have a general idea what that number is for the fields or for any of the use outside? Do we have any sense of that number?
If you have additional questions, why don't you ask
Okay.
them all, and then we'll get them all answered for you.
Reason I bring that up is that under the Community Preservation Act, it is legal to use funds for outside recreational use that can be used by the community, as well as fields, athletic fields. What I was just proposing, particularly where we just brought back $1 million that we thought we had spent on the other project that we voted earlier, would it make sense to see if we could use some of the monies that legally could be allocated to the high school relative to the outside athletic fields to help just bring down the costs, or also give the building committee a little more flexibility with the contingency? So it's just something I'd like to throw out there. I think it would be legal, maybe something we could look at and maybe just help reduce the borrowing costs slightly in the tax bills, as well as, more importantly, give another source of funding for the committee to be able to utilize as they're going through the final budgets. And my lasting item is someone who used to be on the finance committee back in the late 90s. When we had the master plan, I want to remind everybody, we could have built 2 elementary schools and the high school for a total of $90 million. The master plan that the people put in just as much work back then as these folks have done today did not pass because we were all nervous about taking on too much debt and spending too much money. Well, look what time has done to us. We have now spent 4 times that to do all the schools, and here we're left with the middle school costing as much as what we could have done 3 buildings.
you.
So I just want to remind everybody of that. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I think that was mostly a point of view rather than a question. We're going to hold that question, and if we have a few more, we'll get them answered all at once, and that'll be a little more efficient for us. Do you have another speaker at a microphone in the auditorium?
I do, at microphone number 2.
Anita Techley, 260 Virginia Road.
Go ahead, Anita.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Concord needs a new middle school, and I voted to support that in January of '22. Since then, interest rates and building costs have risen so that we can no longer construct the building that was presented to us a year ago for $103 million. Instead of asking the town for more funds now and possibly again at the annual town meeting in April, I asked that the building committee look seriously at what can be built for the $103 million that's already been allotted. We're all struggling with increased costs in our households and businesses. Food, gasoline, heating costs, utilities have all increased. Incomes for most of us have not increased. The amount that was appropriated a year ago will already increase our property taxes, as we've heard, for the medium-priced home by over $1,000 a year for 30 years. It's presented to us tonight that Article 5 will only increase that by another $73. That may sound like a pittance to some, but I ask that you look at the cumulative effect. Now is the time to say that enough is enough. The $110 million that has been requested, including the 77.2 under Article 5 that we're voting on tonight, is more than what Concord paid for the 3 elementary schools and the high school combined after deducting state aid in Carlisle's portion of the high school debt. All of those, the 4 school buildings cost the town a little over $99,000. Think about that. More details are in a handout that I prepared that was out on the table. I asked the building committee to take a fresh look, perhaps with the addition of new members, and determine what we really need and find more significant ways to reduce the cost of this project. I urge a no vote on Article 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Flood, do you have another speaker there in the auditorium?
Not at the moment.
All right, then
There's
we
somebody
will-
rising, however. I
Well-
don't know if she's heading to the microphone.
Well, let's go back to the gymnasium for now, and we'll
Okay.
go to microphone number 1.
Peggy Wardland, 97 Hillside Ave.
Please proceed.
When my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now 24, was going to enter the middle school 14 years ago, I think I added that right, the woman who was giving us the tour was showing us everything, and we were all like just flabbergasted at how much a new school was needed. And she said, yes, my oldest daughter is now 24, and when she was entering, and we were all having the same reaction. So the middle school definitely needs to be rebuilt. My children are now out of the schools, and my parents live with us, and we are paying for college for one of them, and budgets are really tight, but all 5 of us still really support this and hope that you will vote for it. I will also throw out a quick, we found an article online that was talking about the effect of inflation, and your prices for things are sort of fixed when you first sort of become an adult and are going out there. So for me, that's like the mid-'80s. And so my husband and I used to go, oh my God, that much for a sandwich? And then we go, oh yeah, divide by 2. Yeah, it's okay. And I found this site that was talking about with the increases. And for my parents, they have to divide by 10 in order to make it feel right to them. And so inflation is what it is, and we're going to have to pay for this eventually. We urge yes.
Thank you very much. We'll go to microphone number 2 now in the gymnasium.
Ruthie Bennett, 114 Deergrass Lane.
Ms. Bennett.
Thank you. I'm an architect. I'm a LEED accredited professional, which means I'm an expert in sustainable building and construction. And for my job all day, I manage construction projects ranging from $10 million to $175 million. So for 2 years, I've been doing this. I've been trying to manage projects that are over budget. Architects, contractors, cost estimators are all helping us. And because that's all the money that we've been allocated, that's what we do. We build to the budget that we were approved to. And it's painful. There are cuts, there are delays. But this town approved a budget of $102 million, which I voted for and supported. And now we don't want to live within that budget. I think the creation of fear that it'll cost more is not a fact. It's not clear. Lumber has gone down by 15% in 2022. So there are, luckily and hopefully, changes in the market. I think the challenge for me is when I have a budget, I live within the budget. Not always fun for me or my family, but that is the mature adult thing to do. The increase in property taxes of $73 can seem like not a lot, but really it's the principle of how we're managing ourselves. We're also continually decreasing the ability for people to move to Concord because they have to have a higher and higher income. So as we talk about diversity in our schools and in our community, we're creating only very affluent groups of people can move to Concord. It becomes more and more challenging, and I would hope not the principles that we aspire to live by. So I recommend a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to microphone number 3 in the gymnasium, and after that, we'll return to the auditorium.
Yeah, my name is James Cohane. I live at 44 Central Street.
Yes, Mr. Cohane.
So I was born and raised in Concord. My wife is Ashley Cohane, formerly Ashley Anderson. She was born and raised in Concord and attended the elementary, middle, and high schools, as did her father, Ken Anderson. My wife is now a math teacher here at CCHS. We have 2 kids, a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. We plan to send them to Thoreau for elementary, this new middle school, which we're going to build, and CCHS for high school. I plan to vote yes today, and I'll be candid, I really don't understand the logic of the folks who plan to vote no on this project. As far as I can tell, their opposition boils down to something like, it's too expensive. I did not realize that all of you voting no were experts in middle school construction costs. I also don't understand some of the other arguments, like we should scale back the design and get rid of the gym and or the auditorium. Really? Concord is too strapped for cash that we can't afford a middle school with an auditorium or a gym for our kids? Really? The most compelling argument for me to vote yes is that all we are voting on today is the incremental $7 million in construction costs, which translates to an increase to the average homeowner's tax bill of about $75 a year. I don't know about all of you, but that is a rounding error for the vast majority of town residents. And if $75 is too much for you, my understanding is that the town has resources available for tax mitigation for those who need it. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to the auditorium.
Go ahead, please, microphone number 2.
I live in Concord, and I did work in the schools for about 25 years, so I have some good thoughts that I'd like to put out there. I also have 3 kids. They all went through the schools, and 3 grandchildren who actually did the same thing. The last one graduated 2 years ago, I guess. I think something that sticks in my mind and has for many, many years is that when we moved here in 1968, Sanborn School had just been basically built. The very first use of it discovered that it was not large enough to take all the 6 through 8 children who lived here, partly because the state had begun to advocate for middle school rather than K-6 elementary and 9-12 high school. So Peabody, which was built also at about the same time and was built for an open teaching elementary school, was never used as an elementary school and became part of the middle school. So for people anywhere near my age, I'm sure you remember your children, and I was a 5th grade teacher, so we were always placing to Sanborn or to Peabody, and there were 3 grades in each school. This year, unfortunately, we have grade 6 in Peabody and 7 and 8 in Sanborn, which is not, in my mind, much of a middle school. So I'm really not talking so much about the finances as the needs of our children. I mean, that's important. We have built every single elementary school and the high school, and now, somehow, the middle school is still sitting there, and it needs a lot of change, it needs a lot of upgrading, and I think there's no question that we should totally support it in every way we can, not just money, but for everyone who lives in this community. Thank you.
Do you have another, thank you. Do you have another speaker in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
I don't see it. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, microphone number 1. Go ahead, please, sir.
Peter Lee, 140 Walden Street. My son went to Sanborn. I think this is a great town. The schools are great, and this is going to be a fantastic school. So I want to thank this committee and everyone involved. I'm sure you've done an amazing job, and it's going to be great. I am a little troubled by the proposal tonight. It's not, to me, a normal proposal. I worked in business. I've handled large budgets. I worked on the board of a school elsewhere, responsible for budgets and hiring. And it's rare that I see a proposal where I'm the owner or the stakeholder and my committee delegated to spend $102 million with a budget comes back with a proposal, which is fine. The proposal says option A is we need another $7 million. And I think personally, $73 is worth it. I mean, I'll pay 100, 200. I think it's worth it. But the proposal A is give us this money. Proposal B is that we have failed to come up with proposal B. So proposal B is that the project will be delayed while we figure it out, and we set out these committees to figure it out. Why didn't we do it a year ago, 6 months ago? I do that with my projects. I'm looking at costs. If I pay for this, I can't pay for that. And if this goes overruns with inflation, I cut this or that. You think about these things. So I'm troubled that the committee has come to us with an option A, and option B that's not an option at all. It's really option B. We have failed giving option B, so you better do option A. So I'm very tempted to vote against this, even though I'm in favor of the school, because the purpose of voting is not can I afford $73? I can afford 100, maybe 105. This is a legislature. We decide what is good for the town's residents. Some of them are not here. Some of them can't walk here. Some of them cannot afford this. Is it really good for the town to have a process that is, in my mind, slightly out of control, and it gives us this kind of option where give us the money or else you're going to pay more, and we're going to delay the school year possibly by a whole year? That is devastating.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. You are out of time. I want to ask Ms. Gurello to come and address the question that was raised about the use of CPC funds for the project.
May I also address this question, Madam Moderator?
What question was that?
Well, he was suggesting that there's an option A and no option B. May I?
Well, start with the CPC question, and if you want to state something briefly in response to the last speaker, please be brief.
I will. Thank you, Madam Moderator. In response to the cost for playgrounds, fields, and actually I'll throw landscaping in there, it's approximately 1.8-ish, somewhere between 1.5 and 2. It's actually a deduct alternate that we're considering, which would mean if our bids came in high, that we would look to reduce some of that. And we are, in fact, Mr. Peter Fashalis on our committee has graciously offered to work towards finding out if we can use CPA funds, and that came up at the public hearing in December, and we're working towards that. I want to remind everyone that this is actually a not to exceed 7.2 million, which means we wouldn't go over, but we're hopeful that we could go under. And in the event that we could use CPA funds for some of the fields and playgrounds, we would obviously do that and not have to borrow as much. So I think that is an appropriate answer. And then to address the Plan A and no Plan B, we had to, as a committee, back in June, make a decision. We're in design development. If anyone knows how construction works, that's approximately 50% through the design phase. And we had to make a decision. In order to stay on schedule, do we ask our professionals to keep designing this building that we believe is the right building for Concord, or do we stop, change the schedule, and revisit everything? Our committee voted to have them continue forward, and option B would be to redesign, and that would actually cost us more money. We would have to pay the professionals to design 2 buildings in parallel. So hopefully that addresses the Plan B, which is why we think we know what the cuts would be, but we haven't designed it because we would have to pay someone to do so.
Thank you, Ms. Gurel. And we'll go back to the auditorium, and I see that you have one more speaker there. Ms. Flood.
I do. Please go ahead, person at microphone number 2.
13 Concord Green. I just want to remind people that whenever we're thinking of the costs of something, we have to also think of the costs of not doing it. And in this case, the costs of not doing it are vast, because a town isn't as nimble as a corporation or a family who can get together easily and make decisions to cut or to add this or that. The town can't do that. We aren't going to get our ideal building no matter how much we spend, because it's the town doing it. So we need to get what we can as the best that we can, and not spend more money aiming at everybody's individual ideal outcome.
Thank you, Ms. Drett. We'll return now to the gymnasium, and we'll go to microphone number 3.
My name is Mary Weinberg. I will be 78 in 2 months. I moved here when I was 34 in 1979.
Can you give us your address, please?
26 Hillside Avenue in West Concord. We spent $71,000 for our house, 100% mortgage. I just paid off the mortgage in 2015. I love this town. I did a lot of work community-wise for West Concord in the 80s, early 90s. I never voted against anything anytime money was raised. I watched my taxes. I've paid them. I never even added another bathroom. I live very modestly, watched my dollars and cents. I have 1 bathroom. I didn't build up my home. Now, I'd love to live here, but I've reached in the last 5 years, my property tax was raised $250,000. Now my taxes are up to $12,000 a year. I've never come before, and people know me from the 80s. I usually worked on projects that I didn't personally benefit. I want to mention this. I learned about the tax stabilization plan, and I'm going to be quick now, because in the old days we got more than 2 minutes. A tax stabilization plan means a fixed property tax for seniors with fixed incomes tax stabilization plan. I don't know if this is right, but I'd like to make a motion to amend Article 5 to include a vote on a non-binding resolution for the town of Concord to come up with a stabilization plan for senior citizens, a tax cap.
Okay, if you want to make an amendment, I'm going to need you to work with the town meeting resource person there, and we need 2 copies of it in writing, and we'll review it, and we'll decide whether it's within the scope of the article. But why don't you sit down there with Ms. Woodward and work on that amendment, and you come back when it's ready.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to microphone number 1.
Hi, my name is Ann Sussman. I live at 534 Old Marlborough Road.
Ms. Sussman.
And I'm not that happy to be here. Why are we all here? Well, I could argue that after living here 11 years, living in 12 years in Acton before that, what Concord is here because Concord doesn't have the structure in place to do $100 million projects that people can be confident in. I am a licensed architect. I run a nonprofit called the Human Architecture and Planning Institute. The issue is you need a design review board. A design review board, if you go to Weston, if you go to Wellesley, if you want to build anything in Acton, Boxborough, Wellfleet, Cambridge, Lexington Design Advisory Committee. Why have they had these committees for 20 and 30 years?
Ms. Sussman, I think that's actually not strictly speaking within the scope of the article before us. Would you like to address the article here?
This is what I'm going to bring it in. Give me 1 second. Vote no, so we can understand. We can get a design review board up and working in 2 months, and we can understand how to design a project like this. Concord is hurting itself, and it is not running its government like other communities do, and it's hurting all of us.
Thank you very much. We'll go to microphone 2 in the gymnasium now.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Winterkorn. I live at 800 Main Street in Concord.
Yes.
I have 3 kids. One just graduated last year. My children will never see the outcome of this project, but I am also the treasurer of the Concord Association of Music Parents, and we support the children who play instruments and sing music in the elementary and middle schools. It is imperative that we remember that we are only a half or less than half of the population in Concord. The remaining population in Concord is the children who can't vote. They need this building. They need music. They need an education that allows them to be fully fledged adults in a world that has stopped valuing music. And they need a sport. I was a tri-varsity athlete. My kids couldn't throw a ball to save their souls, right? But they need gyms. They need a fully sized gym. And to be perfectly honest, these are the first things that are going to be on the chopping block if you send this project back. It's not going to be the net zero fancy things that everybody else thinks should be marvelous. Those should be the things that are mitigated that cost significantly more money. Those are not going to be the things that are cut. And that is a tragedy for this entire community. We have children that go to junior districts, to senior districts, to Allstate. If you cut the auditorium, you're cutting the music program, you're reducing Concord's ability to produce musicians and athletes and strong college, potential students. You are doing a disservice to the entire community by not just passing this and letting the auditorium and the gym go forward. And I understand about the financial issues. I have to pay them too, and college. I think we need to vote yes on this and move on.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to microphone number 1 now.
Madam Moderator, George Corrett, I abide at 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett?
Thank you. So I would love to empower the current committee and the future committee to get a better perspective and a better deal by voting no. Because I think that town meeting's part of this process. And if people think that they can always go back to town meeting and get that extra whatever, you know, $10 million, it makes it really hard to sharpen the pencils. I was interested by this, the presentation mentioned something about $6 million that they saved already by sharpening the pencils. And that's interesting to me. Now, I have to apologize for where I'm coming from here, because people, another speaker asked, how could possibly somebody vote against this if they don't consider themselves some kind of an expert? So my apology is that where I'm coming from is I grew up and went to schools in the county in the United States, which was majority African American, but which was the wealthiest majority African American county in the United States. And, you know, I look at our schools here that we built recently, and they're fancy. You know, I didn't go to a high school with an atrium in it, you know? And it just, everything looks luxurious. But there's ways to sharpen the pencils and say, hey, you know, you can get a good education in a place that's not fancy, that just doesn't have the accoutrement of luxury. And again, that's what I tend to see. But that's my apology, where where I'm coming from. You know, I didn't grow up in Montgomery County. I grew up in Prince George's County. So I have a slightly different perspective.
Thank you very much. We'll go now back to the auditorium.
Microphone number 3, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Price. I live at 113 Neshoba Road. I'm listening to people's very considered pro and con arguments on this article, which is very important. I think I just need to maybe people are aware of this, but one of the reasons why we are in this place is we did not get any money from the school building authority at the state level. We've been turned down. That particular income stream that was able to offset costs in building the high school is not there for us. So we're carrying it. The other thing I would like to say is, I don't know how many people have walked through either Sanborn or Peabody. Those buildings are held together by duct tape and love. This is really important to know. The teachers will keep on teaching. The children will keep on learning, but the facilities are outdated and they are falling apart. If we go to a no vote and this is delayed yet again, the reality of what the children are experiencing every day in that building, heat, cold, leaking, loose tiles, that's real. So we really need to think about this not only again from the perspective of dollars, and it'll be my tax dollars too, but also by the experience of the children who were there. So as we're weighing yay or nay, think of the children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll next, do you have another speaker in the auditorium, Ms. Blood?
Not at the current time.
Okay. We'll go to microphone number 3.
Hello, my name is Rosalind Sheffitz. I live at 204 Oak Hill Circle. I have been a resident of Concord for 45 years, and I hope to stay in Concord. I was a teacher in an affluent community nearby for 30 years. I urge you to vote no. All of my expenses have gone up everywhere I look. I'm retired now on a fixed income and a widow. Some people here may be able to afford any kind of increase, and if that's the case, subsidize seniors. If that's not the case, I urge you to vote no. And I want to tell you one more thing. The first school I ever taught at in 1969, was an older building, quite old. And you know what? We had the best time. The children learned. It was a happy environment. And the building does not make the education. So I urge people to vote no. And I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. I just want to note for folks that Ms. Weinberg offered an amendment that we consider adding the development of a senior stabilization tax plan to the end of this article, and I've ruled that amendment out of scope because I don't believe that anybody reading the article as printed in the warrant would have had any idea that we were going to be talking about that topic. So I've just, since it was brought up, I just wanted everyone to know that that was what the ruling of the chair was on that question. We'll now go to microphone number 2.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Kate McEnany, 58 Walnut Street.
Ms. McElhaney.
I have so much respect for all the considered comments that have been made, and also for the other folks standing at the microphone. It seems that a lot of the different arguments have been articulated, and I was wondering if we could put the procedure in place where we go to a vote at this point. Is that something that?
It sounds like you are moving to call the question.
May we call the question?
Yes, you are moving to call the question, and I will note that we have been talking here for about 35 minutes, so I can't say that this is an inappropriate motion at this juncture. I do see that there are people still at the microphone, but it is up to the meeting when the meeting chooses to end deliberation because we feel we've had enough and proceed to a vote. So this is a non-debatable motion, and it does require a 2/3 vote. So we need 2/3 of the folks here to agree that we are done deliberating and ready for a vote. I will ask all those in favor of calling the question. Yeah, thanks. All those in favor of calling the question? All right, thank you. All those opposed? All right, that's way more than 2/3 in the gymnasium. What's it look like in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
Likewise in the auditorium.
All right, the motion passes, and we will now proceed to a vote on Article 5. And the motion again is to appropriate the additional amount of $7,200,000 for the purposes stated in Article 5 and to authorize the raising of that amount by borrowing, subject again to the affirmative debt exclusion vote of the town, which is all set forward in Article 5. All right, all those in favor of Article 5, please raise your voting slips. And I will note this is a 2/3 vote because it involves a borrowing. All right, all those opposed? All right, we have well more than 2/3 in the gymnasium. What's it look like in the auditorium, Ms. Flood?
It's the same here.
All right, then the motion passes by well more than 2/3, and I do so declare I will accept a motion to adjourn the meeting without return. Do we have a motion? I see that we do. Do we have a second? Thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you all. I know what. It's not my choice. I know.